I was very fortunate to be invited to Dreamforce this year. As most of you already know, in Dreamforce there was a very, very big announcement, and the announcement was that the workflow rules and process builders were going to be retired. So we still have some time until the point where we cannot use any workflow rules or process builders. But obviously this announcement changed the whole focus on flows. Now, I've been teaching flows for quite some time, but honestly, I did not spend a lot of time building workflows or process builders. For me, most of the automation that I have done has always been built on flows. So when I was invited to present at San Francisco user group, I prepared a special presentation of some very common and simple use cases that many of us build automation using workflow rules and process builders. And I built those also on Flow so that we can compare whether Flow is easier or harder to build in those scenarios. Please note that I decided to use the create element in Flows to create a task, for example, rather than the actions. We can use the actions instead of the create elements to do some of the things that I'm doing in this presentation and demo. Enjoy. So we talked about Dreamforce briefly, and one of the important announcements of Dreamforce was the fact that Salesforce announced the workflow builder, workflow rules and the process builders are going to be retired. And they even announced a timeline for that, which I thought was very interesting and a little bit aggressive. Knowing that Salesforce doesn't actually turn off things easy, I mean, we still have Classic. I don't think they are going to turn off things based on that timeline, but it is very evident that they want people to think about this. They want their clients to learn flows and at the same time build new things on flows rather than workflow rules and process builders, which is obviously welcome announcement from my side. I'm biased on this, obviously, but that was very interesting. Another interesting thing for me, the presentations and you know the material that we saw in Dreamforce was quite Slack focused, and which was expected. And at the same time, we saw a lot of flow launching inside Slack. Have you folks seen this? I mean, the screen flow launching inside Slack and, you know, completing a fulfillment order, doing like an approval. I don't know, like there were so many examples. It seemed like almost every presentation had some Slack and inside Slack, some flow built into it. So, which was also very interesting. By the way, I mean, I don't know how easy it is to set those things up because they announced 4 or 5 different integrations for Slack and Salesforce also during Dreamforce, which I have not seen and I have not tried. But you know, as most of you know, on video and during Dreamforce, they all look so easy, right? You know, you just put them together and they magically work, which is not the case. So now let's go ahead and look at our workflows for this session. Do you have any questions so far?
Like one of the questions was, what was the retirement timeline?
I think they said 2023 February. They said 2023, and what retirement means with that announcement is you are not going to be able to build new ones. You are going to be able to use the existing ones, and you are going to be able to edit them. So that was the timeline that was discussed. It's in the recording, and many people have taken that down, and they have shared that on their LinkedIn and on their social channels. So you can just find it there. It should be on Salesforce Plus right now. So now what we are going to do today is we are going to look at popular workflow rules, right? What do we usually do in workflows? So I decided to work on leads for this example, the use case example. So what we are going to do in workflow is whenever we have a lead that's coming from, and it's right here, the workflow is right here. Whenever we have a lead that's coming from partner referral channel, that lead is going to be rated hot. So it's going to be a hot lead, right? When we look at the lead object here, let's look at the Bertha Boxer example. And when we look at the field values here, we are going to see that there is I'm in the sales console. Let me just, this makes things a little bit cluttered. Let me just go in here. So we are going to see that there's a lead source field, and then there's also a rating field, and these are standard. And when we look at the lead source, the lead can come from various different resources. If it comes from partner referral, I want this lead to be automatically marked as hot in the rating, right? So the way you would do that in a workflow rule is you'd create a workflow rule. And the nice thing about workflow rules, which people still like, it actually gives you a form to fill out, like you are kind of guided through the process. So the way you would do that is you would create a lead hot workflow rule, and you could mark that this workflow rule should run whenever a lead is created and every time it's edited, right? And the lead source equals partner referral will be my rule criteria. And I can define actions actually that go along with this. I could say, I want to mark the field update. I want to do a field update. And this field update is going to update the rating field hot. My screen is not refreshing. Field update. And you can see that right here. So update rating hot. And what this one does is it is going to actually, let me just go into edit here. It is going to actually update the rating field with a specific value that's hot. So that's how you would do this one in the workflow rule. So it's totally possible. It'll work totally fine. And we have many of these in our existing organizations that we have, that we are working on daily. It is fast and efficient, actually. I mean, there are potentially some problems with workflow rules, but they are, in general, good solutions. Now, how would you do that in a process builder? Process builder is a tool, as far as I know, that came after workflow rules. It is more powerful. There are many more things you can do when compared to workflows. And the way you would do a process is you would actually pick the object that your process is going to run on, right? And you are going to do a decision step where you are checking that the lead source equals the pick list value partner referral. And you are going to define an immediate action that's going to execute without any further criteria that the rating pick list value should be assigned as hot. So that's how you would do this. Now, the one thing that workflow doesn't do is when you are dealing with pick list values, it doesn't really present you the available options as far as I saw when I was building one. But here, when you are building this step over here and you are choosing your value that you want to assign to, you see all the available options in your pick list. So if you activate this one and start running it, you are going to get the same outcome. So how do we do this in Flows? Now, Flows are much more powerful than even, I gotta get out this way. Flows are even much more powerful than process builders. So what you can do in Flows can be best described by looking at the new Flow Dialog. So when you look at the new Flow Dialog, you are presented with several options. So you can build a screen flow, record triggered flow, schedule triggered flow, platform event triggered flow, auto launch flow. Flows were originally created to guide call center agents, support people, salespeople through certain scripts. So you can display on the screen what they need to tell to the client and what kind of information they need to present, what kind of information they need to collect and update. So that's your screen flow. Your record triggered flow is the part that corresponds to process builder and workflow. So when we're talking about workflow builders and workflow rules and process builders, we're just talking about this space over here. Schedule triggered flows is your time triggers, for example, in your workflows. They are much more powerful than what we have over there. Platform event triggered flows are an advanced topic, so we're not going to talk about those today, but they are also quite powerful. And auto launch flows are flows that run in the background. They are not like record triggered flows. They don't trigger based on a record created or updated. You can launch auto launch flows using Apex processes, REST API, and a lot more things. You can tie them to a button. You can run them in many different ways. So what we want to do here is a record triggered flow. And we are presented two different options now. There's a free form and auto layout beta. Now, when you're first starting, you should start with auto layout beta because it's easier. This is the area where Salesforce tries to make things easy for you and, lays out all the different elements. So you need to pick which object you are going to trigger your trigger on, and then pick whether you want to do this on both create and update. And you are going to define your conditions. This is your start criteria. In our case, this is going to be lead source. If you start typing, you are going to see, whatever you're typing match the available field value names, field names. And then you're going to say when lead source equals, and again, we have here the availability of various different pick list values. We can choose from them. We don't really need to type. Lead source equals partner referral. I want to trigger this flow. And this is a more advanced selection here that we're not going to worry about for now. Now, this is where we are going to choose whether this flow runs before save or after save. So this is a winter 22 preview org. So we are looking at the new release functionality. In the new release, the start element looks a little bit different. Now, the left button is your before save. The right button is your after save. Now, these are renamed to help the new beginners to say the left side is for fast field updates and the right side is actions and related records. So the only thing you need to know here is whenever you are only updating the record that triggered the flow itself, we are going to be operating on the left side. Whenever we have to do updates on the related records, or we need to create a related record to the record that triggered the flow, then we are operating on the right side. So your before save, we are going to operate here in the fast field updates area. So we have triggered our flow, and the next thing is we are going to do an update element, and I'm going to say update hot here. And I am presented an option that says I'm going to update the lead record that triggered the flow. That's what I want. Do I want to set additional filter conditions? No, I actually triggered my flow based on the starting criteria that I have specified. And I'm going to say, you know, this record's rating should be hot. So you see this arrow over here. So the hot value is going to be assigned to the rating for the lead record that triggered the flow. So save this. We need to give it a name. Let's call this update lead hot San Francisco record triggered flow. Flow API name is going to auto assign. I have a bunch of advanced options here I'm not going to touch for now. Save and activate. So when I go back to my Bertha Boxer record, what this is going to do for me is I'm going to first reset this record to cold, and the source being web, save it. This should not trigger my flow because the source is web. It's not partner referral. And as you can see, the rating remained cold. So now I'm going to change the lead source to partner referral and save it. I'm going to see that the rating for the lead immediately changed to hot. Now, the cool thing about this is the thing that you know about, that you need to know about performance and efficiency is the fact that when I explained to you briefly what we do with before save and after save, everything that the workflow rules and the process builders do is after save. So after save is slower, less efficient, and is prone to more problems in terms of recursion. It happens later in the order of execution. And what we are doing here in the flow is before save, which means it happens much earlier in the order of execution, and it's much less prone to any problems. It's very efficient, and it's super fast. In fact, the before save flow triggers before Apex trigger. So as an admin, you have the fastest tool available to you if you are doing field updates on the same record that triggered the flow. So any questions so far?
Yeah, so in our flows, they all kind of, well, they're kind of launched from Process Builder. So we had to pass a bunch of variables from Process Builder into the flow, and then the flow, we have to define all these variables and whatnot. But do you, on your flow, you didn't really have to do anything with variables. Is that only for certain use cases, or?
Oh, okay, very good question. Now, when you are dealing with workflow rules, process builders, and before save flows, in general, unless your use case requires, you don't really deal with variables. You are dealing with the record and field values that actually trigger the flow. So you don't really have to deal with that. But if you are going to do advanced calculations, formulas, then you have to deal with variables. You might need to add a field value to another variable and then, bring things together. I'll give you an example. You could find this example, actually a similar one on the YouTube channel. So if you wanted to name your record, for example, something that consists of a couple of field values. So let's say you're creating an opportunity and you want the opportunity name to always be the account plus the amount of the opportunity, right? So it's going to say Stark Industries dash $1 million. So you could do that in Flow, but you have to construct that string as a formula. And once you start constructing that field as a formula, then you have to create a formula and possibly play with variables and things like that.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
But I mean, if you are doing screen flows, if you are doing auto launch flows, if you are especially passing values from process to flow, then you have to deal with variables. And in fact, the way you pass values from process builder to flow, and this is not going to be, is it going to be available to me here? Yeah, it's available. You could, for example, define a text variable here. Let's say you want to pass the record ID from process to flow. You would create a variable named record ID and then of data type text, and then you would mark it available for input right here to pass the value from your process to flow.
So what's the difference between available for input and available for output?
Well, if you're passing values to your flow, then you need to mark your variable available for input. If you want that value to be passed back and you want to use it somewhere else, then you have to also mark it as available for output.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I guess my other question would be, if they're going to get rid of Process Builder, what about our flows that are launched from Process Builder? We have to build the front end of that in Flow and then attach it to the existing flow. Or like, can you launch a flow from a flow, or you just have to build it?
Yeah, absolutely you can.
Okay.
Well, if you're launching a flow from a process builder, your flow is actually an auto launch flow. An auto launch flow by nature is also a subflow. So meaning you can call that flow from another flow. So what you would do is you would take your logic to flow. And part of the reason why people used to do that is because we didn't have subflows available for record triggered flows before Winter 22. Now we do. So now you can actually take your process builder logic and you can port it to the flow side and then attach the same flow without much modification as a subflow to that flow.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
So any other questions? How are we doing for time?
We have plenty of time. If you have, if you can want to go into a different example or
Yes.
another. Okay.
We have another example ready. I was just not sure whether we're doing okay for time. So
We're good.
Now, awesome. So now let's go back. Do you still see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's go back to workflows. Another workflow example that many commonly uses right here. I have built that one already in my lead hot workflow rule. I have two actions. One is update the rating hot, and then we want to also create a task to follow up on lead. What does this task creation do for us is it is going to create a task on the lead object assigned to the lead owner, and then the subject of this task is going to read follow up on lead, and the due date is going to be the rule trigger date plus 7 days, meaning if I've done my lead update today and trigger this one, it's going to set the due date in 7 days. And the comments is going to read the same as the subject, which is follow up on lead. So it's going to, this workflow rule is going to do 2 things for me. One, update the rating hot, and at the same time, create a task for me. And you can see that example here. I have done that already. If I have not deleted it, you can see this is the task that's being created. So it is going to be associated with the lead, and it is going to be assigned to the lead owner, and here is the due date that you see, and so on. So the cool thing about this one on the workflow side is the fact that whenever you do a task action on your in your workflow rule, you actually get a nice form that tells you and reminds you what needs to be filled out, right? So it's hard to miss that. You know, you can select whom this task is going to be assigned to, and you can pick a user, or you can also choose if you want to assign this to the lead owner. And you know, you have all the critical fields in front of you, the required fields, obviously, that you need to fill out. It's hard to make a mistake here. So if you want to do that on the process side, and I've done that already on the process builder side in my last version, you are going to simply take the same process builder that we have just shown, and here in my immediate action step, I'm going to add just another step, another immediate action that's going to say create a task. Now here, it's a little bit different. You need to list all the fields. The fields are available to you, so you can pick the fields, that's fine. And then you need to decide whether you want to assign a string or a formula value or a field reference to your fields. Here you can see that I had to create a formula to tell Salesforce that I want this due date to be in 7 days. It was a little bit easier on the other side. Here I have to know my way around formulas. It's a very simple formula, but still. And I have to also remember to pass the right values to all the required fields. For example, when I first did this, my first version, I tried to pass to the name ID the owner's ID. Like the user's ID, I try to pass to the name ID, but the name ID is actually for the record that the task is associated to. In this case, it's the lead ID. That was all taken care of for me on the workflow side. So, but this is going to do the same thing. I tested it works, so it's going to do the same thing that we have done on the workflow side. Let's go to the flow side. Now, on the flow side, this is going to be a little bit different. This is the one I have created. And instead of building this one, let me just show you the one I built. And if it's necessary, we can just build it. But so this is the one I have created preparing for this session. And whenever you're dealing with flows, I highly recommend to go in here rather than clicking on the flow label here to see all your versions and see which one is active, which one is not active. So the last version I have created, the number 3, should have this. So my original flow was just this big, 2 elements, right? The start element and the update step where I was updating the field value to hot. Now there is one important difference between the first flow we've built and the second flow we've built. This time, we cannot really do a fast field update. Can anybody tell me why? It can't be before save.
Because it's a related type thing.
Exactly. So what we have just discussed, because we are creating a related record, we cannot operate in the super efficient and fast before save area. We have to do an after save, which also means my start element, I have to now click on actions and related records. So I can still work with the same flow and build on it, but I have to go back, and then instead of fast field updates, I have to make sure I select actions and related records. If I don't, I'm not going to even see a create task, a create records element made available to me. So when I click on this, I'm not going to see a create records element. Here, I'm going to add a create records element. And in my create records element, I'm going to tell Salesforce I want to create one object record, and I'm going to use separate resources and literal values for each different field on the record. And the object is going to be of type task. And these are all the fields that I'm going to assign values to. Again, here, I need to make sure that I assign the right values to all the fields that especially are required, right? You know, if I leave a field that's required empty or null, I'm going to get an error message back. So I assign a value to activity date, description, owner ID, priority, subject, and who ID. And the funny thing is, you know, who ID is the field name you see, for example, here, but on the other side, that's not what you see. You'll see name ID. You know, like there are subtle differences that could throw off people coming from the other area to flows. And here in and this question was asked whether we are dealing with variables. We actually deal with two types of variables. One, the variables that are auto-created for us. Dollar record variable is one of them. When we use a dollar record variable, we are referring to the record that actually triggered the flow, and then we can refer to the field value that's under that record. That is auto-created for me, and it's readily made available by Salesforce. And the way I refer to that is I can start typing record, and I can see that the lead dollar record is here, and then I can drill down to grab the ID for that record here to refer to it. And here we also discussed formulas. I created a formula called in a week formula. In flows, we cannot really write a formula here right in this box like you've seen in process. So we need to create a formula resource on the left side, and over there, you are going to see the formula actually reads exactly the same as you have seen on the process side. So it's now parentheses plus 7. It's 7 days from now. So this flow, let me just leave from here. Let's activate this flow. We need to make sure that the other flow we have just created is deactivated so that they don't actually throw each other off. This is also active. This is the one we have created in this session. So I'm going to go ahead and deactivate that one. And so that I know that I am created this task from flow, I have put actually dash flow in the subject line and in the description for this. So I have the Bertha Boxer record here, and you can see that I have tested these things before, and I have a task that was created by process, and I think There is probably another one that was created by Flow before, but I don't see it over here. So I'm going to go in here and change again, reset this record, change again the source to web and the rating to cold, save. So nothing happened here. The record did not change to rating hot. I'm going to go back to my activities. I don't see a follow-up on lead task for Flow that was created from Flow. So I'm going to go and change this lead source to partner referral. And as soon as I do that, boom, rating is hot and activity, didn't I get a task? That's interesting. Let's go to tasks. Yes, I got a task, but it doesn't show up on the activity timeline for some reason.
Refresh issues when you
Yeah, could be. So yeah, it created my activity, my task. It's assigned to me. Let's check the parameters. It's associated with the lead record. That's fine. Due date is the 6th of October?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. I thought that was wrong for a second. So and the priority is high. The subject line reads follow up on lead dash flow, and the comments read follow up on lead dash flow. Any questions?
I do have a question, Andy. What would happen if both are active, both the workflow rule and the flow?
They'll both trigger, and they'll cause problems. I mean, the thing that process builders are not very good in terms of efficiency and the way they execute and the way they are structured. In fact, in the background, process builders are flows, but the way they are translated and built are much less efficient than flows. Workflow builders are fast and efficient, but the problem with them is they are very prone to recursion. So they can actually launch a couple of times on the same record. So if you are doing a before save flow, your before save flow is going to trigger first. And then along the way somewhere, your workflow is going to trigger again. Trigger as well, and when doing that, that could cause a bunch of problems. So you don't really want to do that. That's why if you are doing your efforts and you are migrating to Flow, you really need to take everything to Flow on the same object at the same time. You don't want some part of it over there and some part of it over here.
Makes sense. Thank you.
And I'll tell you one other thing. When you are dealing with triggers, many things actually happen in the same transaction. Meaning, so when you are doing a change on your record, so let's say we are changing, in this example, we are changing the source for the lead from web to partner referral, right? So when we do that change, the change of the field value, the saving and the committing to transaction, all the triggers that are associated with it, workflows, before save flows, Apex triggers, process builders, validations, approval processes, and this and that, all execute in the same transaction, which means if any of these fail, everything is going to roll back. So that's another thing. So that's also important to understand that many people don't know about. So once you start building things on top of each other, utilizing various different tools, you end up in spaces where even some of the most technical people cannot make meaning of. So things get complicated.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I just want to be conscious of our time. We have about 8 minutes left. I know I appreciate Andy's insight to these things. And I hope everybody got something out of it. I did want to, as we talked about at the very beginning of the session, that Andy is gracious enough to provide a free Udemy to his course. So the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to put a question into the chat window. And then I guess the first person that gives that answer will be able to cash in on that opportunity. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat. And let's see, make sure I capture it correctly. And there it is. There's the question. Dave Morris. Almost. There you go, Anthony. Summer 22.
Is that the right answer?
That's the right answer. It's actually in the thread just above that Robert Ng actually provided. So
Awesome. Congratulations. Yeah.
yay. Yeah, virtual yay. So yeah, so the summer of 22 is for when Salesforce is going to provide a tool to migrate Process Builder to Flows. It'll be kind of interesting to see how effective and how well it works. Because I know I've used some of the other tools and I've had issues, and I've come back to Salesforce and they said, well, it's beta, so you can't expect it to work perfectly. So Anthony, I'd like to be able to get your information, so make sure that we get it to Andy, so that you can actually.
I put my email in the chat window, so Anthony can email me directly. And
all right, perfect.
I'll provide the code to Anthony. It could take a few days, but I'll get it to him. That's
all right. Perfect. I appreciate that. We still have a couple of minutes left. Again, a thank you for putting up with our little glitches and nuances as Paul and I get our feet under and trying to have these sessions. We are looking to have 2 more sessions with Andy and some of his insight. So he'll be looking at the different flows as he alluded to earlier. So hopefully you can join us for those. If there's any questions that you have, Paul and I are willing to stay around for a little bit longer if you want, or give us any positive or negative feedback. Feedback is great. So with that, Paul, did you have anything else that you want to kind of say?
I just want to say that, obviously, thank you, Andy. It was a pleasure meeting you at the Dreamforce and to bring you on board for our first session with the Salesforce admin group. And just let you know, in reaching out and looking at different individuals that are teaching flows, and there are several of them, that are doing what Andy's doing. But this screenshot shows you that right now, as of yesterday, he's got the highest ratings on Udemy, and quite a few, 145. So I think Andy's done an exceptional job in terms of, teaching and illustrating a concept that's, for a lot of people, myself included, very difficult to understand without some help. So thank you, Andy, for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm going to also paste the Slack space that I have for Salesforce Break, where I answer flow questions. You can all join that and then ask me your questions when you get stuck.
Great.
Thank you, Andy, for that. And it's almost like it's like a TV show, having a lifeline saying, hey, I got a question at work. How can I do this? And Andy may be able to help you. So thank you for that, Andy. So with that, I guess, thank all of you for taking time out of your schedule. It's been about an hour and a half. Hopefully you learned something today that's going to help you. And on top of that, hopefully you make some good contacts with other individuals in networking. And Ignacio and I will be staying on for a few minutes. So if you want to stay and chat, you're more than welcome. But if you have to sign out, And on the East Coast, it's getting late right now, but if you have to leave, we understand. We hope to see you at the next meeting.